everyone, welcome to First Tuesdays with Heart. It's Tuesday, August 4th, 2026. First Tuesdays is sponsored by the Heart's Peer Support Team in connection with the Resiliency and Justice Center out of Las Vegas. Heart stands for Healing, Empowering, and Rebuilding Together. We're a peer support program for anyone impacted by any mass violence incident. So real quick, if there's anybody on here who hasn't met us, I wanted to introduce our Heart team. Alice is a licensed professional counselor and a professional coach. She is the co-director of the Heart Peer Support Program, and she also facilitates the Route 91 and UNLV support groups. Jackie is an LMFT. She is the Resiliency and Justice Center's Behavioral Health Program Coordinator, so she actually helps us put all this together. She is one of our original Heart coaches from almost 6 years ago. And she also facilitates a separate Route 91 support group along with the continuing the conversation with Heart support groups. And I'm Jill Winter. I'm the co-director of Heart. I'm a Route 91 survivor. And I, with Alice, do the UNLV support group, and with Jackie, the continuing the conversation with Heart support groups. So we always like to start with something that kind of ties in with what we're talking about. And we thought this was good. In general, healing is not linear. And as we are approaching our remembrance dates, we know, and there's actually science that shows that it can definitely be a bumpy road. So we thought that this would be appropriate for this conversation. So I am super excited to introduce Keley Heckman. Keley is actually somebody I met several years ago in San Diego. She is a Route 91 survivor. She's a licensed clinical social worker with 20 years of experience. She is an EMDRIA certified EMDR therapist, which for those of you who haven't done EMDR, I know my therapist initially said that if you find an EMDR therapist, she highly recommended they be certified, just because, especially of our experience. So Keley actually has done that. She's a consultant in training. She also uses IFS and somatic approaches to help people heal from trauma, anxiety, and burnout. Before she went into private practice, she worked as a psychiatric first responder, helping people in crisis alongside law enforcement. She's seen firsthand how unresolved trauma impacts every aspect of life and knows healing is possible because she's experienced it herself. After surviving Route, Keley used EMDR therapy to reclaim her own sense of safety and balance, and now she's helping do the others do the same. And as I mentioned, she's also done on-site, and I know quite a few of you on here have done the Triumph Over Tragedy program through on-site. If you haven't, I would encourage you to reach out to them and get on the list for them to contact you for the next program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keley.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I was telling him a little bit, some lovely neighbor was blasting Nora Jones at 4 a.m. So if my brain gets a little glitchy, just love me through it. So today we're going to talk about the anniversary effect, how traumatic events and anniversaries impact us, and why they linger. Is it going to go? I want to go. Okay. Glitchy. Okay. So what we'll talk about today, we're going to define what an anniversary reaction is, look at its impact, not only on those that experience a traumatic event, but also family, loved ones. We're going to walk through some of the significant research, just lightly touch on that, because I think it's important to know that what we're experiencing coming up on some anniversaries is backed in science. So we'll explain why it happens, the neuroscience of trauma memory, and then cover what actually helps, coping strategies, and some of the clinical approaches that can help you through things after you experience some trauma. So what is an anniversary reaction? It's just simply either the reemergence or the temporary worsening of traumatic symptoms around an anniversary of a traumatic event. Typically, it can be around the actual date itself, but it can also be a season. It could be a time of year. It could be a birthday, a school year, time of day, lots of different things. a lot of our memories are held through our senses. And so it could even be a smell that sort of uh, teleports you back to that memory. And then there's public and private. Most of us have experienced, I think in this room, have experienced something that's much more on that public scale. But we might also have some individual experiences that might only be related to us, like maybe a car accident that we experienced or something else that's traumatic. Um, and even though a lot of the articles and things that this presentation is supported by talk about PTSD in its own category, I happen to be a therapist that thinks most things are trauma if we're reliving them and they're playing on loop. So, some of it's that was talking about just grief, medical trauma, domestic violence, and more that doesn't fall into that PTSD clinical category can still show up in this way. So even if you don't think, oh, maybe it's not that serious, if it's replaying, your body is reliving it, I think it's significant. So what it can look like. So there's typically four clusters, categories of what a common anniversary symptom or reaction can look like. So there's the emotional, it could be sadness, guilt, grief, fear, anxiety, or even just a restlessness. Maybe there's a week before you just can't really sit still. You feel like you need to constantly be distracted, keep yourself busy. You might be on edge or irritable, or even feeling a little emotionally numb, raw, or detached. There's the cognitive component, intrusive memories, difficulty concentrating, negative self-judgment. Why is this still happening? Why is this still bothering me 10 years later? Um, Vivid nightmares, or even just vivid dreams. They might not even be nightmares. They might just be something related to the event or something kind of similar. And then physical reactions, so fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping, appetite changes, feeling jumpy or on edge. And I even put in like feeling flooded here. So that's that sort of that wave of emotion that comes over your body, even when you can't quite put two and two together of why it's happening to you. And then behavioral, so avoiding people, places, media, withdrawing socially, or overscheduling to stay distracted. And going into a little bit of some of the research. So they did a study on Gulf War veterans, and they found about 31% had anniversary reactions of all of that 31% that were, each one of them were diagnosed with PTSD. And then again, back to that same piece, it doesn't have to, you can still have an anniversary reaction even if you don't have a diagnosis of PTSD or fall into that box. Not everyone who experiences this meets full criteria. So complicated grief, childhood trauma. I'll tell you, CPTSD is a very real thing and it's not in the DSM and can't technically be diagnosed in a therapy office. And almost every single one of the clients that I work with has some form of this showing up in one way or another. So just because it doesn't fit in that diagnostic place, it's more really about what you're experiencing, and that's the significance. So medical trauma, I won't list these all off because you can read them, natural disasters, even military deployment. And during the study, they asked the spouses. I think this is a good demonstration of how this shows up for our families and our loved ones. They interviewed all of the spouses separately, and almost uncanny, same complete responses to those that were experiencing the traumatic reoccurrence. Uh, Sometimes even more. Sometimes the spouses actually were able to put two and two together. This month or this time frame, their symptoms seem to be getting worse. Um, and so it's not only what you're experiencing, it's pretty notable. The research shows that it's pretty notable that our loved ones are able to see that our symptoms or our re-experiencing of the significant date is pretty evident. And then it might even be that survivors worry about their friends and family quite a bit, and so start to get a bit protective or get a little bit more cautious and safety prone around those times of those dates. And some of the good news, anniversaries aren't only about distress, so we can walk away from some really painful experiences. and really feel that grief and that shame and that loss. But we can also have some reflection about just how far we've come, or how significant that event really was, the strength that it took to not only survive that, but get through the weeks and the years afterward. So research on post-traumatic stress shows anniversaries can also become turning points. That can be points of remembrance, rituals, or honoring those that were lost, or what we lost, because it's not only about what we've lost. It's sometimes there's a version of us that we had to say goodbye to. It can help build connection, and it can help make meeting, channeling a date into advocacy, giving back, or renewed purpose. So again, some more research on post-traumatic growth. It's just helping us relate more to others, increase closeness, compassion, and willingness to accept help is always a beautiful thing. New possibilities. I will tell you right now, you would not be hearing my voice right now if I did not experience what I had experienced. And I could not see it at the time. You could not tell me that going through that would have been one of the most beautiful gifts of my life. But I went, and I'm already getting a little choked up as I even say that. I knew I needed EMDR. I didn't know what EMDR was. I just knew I needed it. And it changed my life. And I said, I'm already a therapist. I need to add this into my toolbox. And I think that at least a lot of the clients that I work with really feel that, because I've experienced not only what PTSD feels like, but I've also experienced what complex trauma feels like, that I'm able to really give a different lens into the work that we do. I read all the books. I used to train organizations on trauma-informed care. Until you have PTSD pumping through your body, you can't really ever know. And I think that's just a complete game changer. So um, definitely post-traumatic growth is just a huge part of my healing experience. It can also build your personal strength. So I know I was sitting at the gym last Friday and I did not want to do that workout. And I was like, you can do hard things. You can do. And I was just tapping into that grittiness in there. It can also improve your spiritual or existential change, a deeper engagement with the meaning and purpose. And then just an appreciation for life, a genuine shift into what feels important day to day. And I think it's important to know that growth coexists with distress. So a lot of people sometimes, that post-traumatic growth or tapping into that strength can make some people feel guilty, or a little bit of shame for, like, oof, does this mean that I've moved on? Have I moved on too quickly from something? And they go hand in hand. So we can't enjoy the sunshine without the rain. We can't enjoy the growth without also the distress. So I think that's just an important note. And let's talk a little bit about the neuroscience. I think this is just so important to what we're actually experiencing. So we have the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. I won't get too clinical here, but the amygdala is essentially the alarm system to your brain. It detects danger and emotional intense. It's the emotional part of your brain, the fight or flight. Before your conscious thought, before this can even think, your amygdala is going off, and we want it that way. Because I tell you, I will sit here and I would overthink, is that a snake or is that a garden hose? Is that a snake or is that a garden hose? And I would be bit and, in the hospital real quickly before my little beautiful frontal lobe would talk me out of those things. So it's designed that way to go off before our frontal lobe so we can't overthink, and to protect us from danger. And then the hippocampus is the filing system. So it's going to timestamp that and put it into the filing cabinet and go, okay, this happened on a summer afternoon. This happened when, and maybe even put some sensory information into that timestamp. And then your frontal cortex is sort of that wise advisor, or the CEO. It's going to be able to tell us, like, that was then, this is now. It's going to take the whole picture and say, hey, this reminds me of this thing, or put all of sort of the puzzle pieces together. And an ordinary memory gets filed away. So something happens, all five senses take it in at once: sight, sound, smell, touch, and any internal body sensations, and the amygdala is going to flag it. So this is for happy memories, anything that kind of boast on that. the amygdala is looking for, is this emotionally significant? So it's going to remember that graduation. It's going to remember how good those cinnamon rolls were from that one place. It's going to remember even the bad stuff too. But the amygdala is going to get flagged and it's going to take in all of that rich sensory information and it's going to ask, does this emotionally matter? And it's going to highlight it and it's going to ask the hippocampus to timestamp that and really store this. Hey, this is significant. File this away for later. It's why you don't remember brushing your teeth last week, but you do remember getting engaged. And because it's filing that system away. So the hippocampus timestamps it, it gets a date, place, context, and files along with your story, with your life story. And then the frontal lobe compares that to the then and now and uses that date and place of the hippocampus just filled and checks memory against it and confirms, okay, I'm safe now. That's if everything goes smoothly. But in extreme stress, when it's actually an emotional emergency, and for each and every person, an emotional emergency might mean something different, the amygdala goes into overdrive. Its job is to keep us safe and beautifully alive. And when it goes into overdrive, it you ever be driving down the street and maybe I'm dating myself with my age. Forgive me, ride this train with me. You ever been driving down the street and you're looking for an address, you have to turn down the music so you can find it? This is what your amygdala is doing. It's important to find that address. It's important to figure out what this emergency is. And it's going to turn down the hippocampus and it's going to turn down your frontal cortex. They're not offline, they're just really faint. They're not going to be operating at their normal range. That's why, if you've been in one of these experiences, and everybody in this room has, why too many words in a moment of crisis, you can't even understand it. If someone's, or you're sitting there maybe in the hospital afterwards or going to the doctor's afterwards or a therapy office and someone is just giving you too much information, if you're in fight or flight, it's like, what did they just tell me? So all of that is purposeful brain function. And so the hippocampus never timestamps that. It's not offline, it's just really turned down. And because the amygdala is in so much overdrive, it doesn't get that timestamp. It doesn't get neatly filed into our brain. And because it doesn't get filed into our brain, the frontal lobe can't say that was here and now. It doesn't get stored as a memory and part of the story. It gets stored as we're reliving it. So if this is starting to make a lot of sense, those anniversary dates, why is this still bothering me? You're not remembering, you're reliving. Um, and so when does the brain learn that was then, this is now, after this? So there's this concept of fear extinction. So even if we've experienced a very traumatic event and it didn't get filed right, there's therapies and other ways in which it can then start to learn that was then, this is now. Oh, you know, concerts are safe. That was just, this is the one-off. It won't feel safe for a while, but it will start to relearn through small exposures that it's safe again and start to not make that uh, assumption. I mean, I'm even thinking of just even, we were talking earlier today about the pandemic. Like, first time I saw somebody wearing a mask, my brain made the first assumption, oh my God, is someone like, I just saw someone walking down the street and I thought someone was wearing, it was from a distance and I thought they were wearing like a mask, like they were a robber, because that's what my brain had made that assumption to now. Now, when I see a mask, it makes a completely different assumption, right? Oh, they must be sick, or maybe they are trying to protect themselves from something, right? So our brain is always evolving, always learning. It's only going to keep creating new things based on what it's learned and experienced. And then trauma memories get organized differently in the brain. It's kind of a little bit extra to this. So the Mount Sinai and Yale did a research study, a very small one, which is 28 people, and they did brain scans for those that had PTSD. And they had them recall calm or even just kind of sad memories, mildly sad, not traumatic memories. And then they had them uh, not relive, but retell traumatic memories, and they were all their own stories. Um, and so this is where there's this idea of VAM and SAM. We'll get into it on the next slide a little bit. So the calm and sad memories were filed the usual way that we just talked about. The hippocampus timestamped it, and handled these predictably, the memory was as the memory was supposed to work. But the traumatic memories were filed different. They didn't get that timestamp, and the brain then began to no, the brain wasn't able to put that into that self story, which we'll get into a little bit on the next slide too. So instead of getting filed away in the brain's usual memory system, trauma gets processed by the part of the brain tied to identity. So when it gets into that verbal accessible memory, it goes into a story. This is something that happened to me. When it goes into the situational, that's the SAM, situational accessible memory, it goes into identity story. I am broken. I can't get past this. I'm stuck. And so, which is why part of it can feel like less like something happened to you and more like something as a part of who we are. Um, let's see. And then, so a little bit more on the VAM and the SAM. So our verbal accessible memory is told in like a normal conversational way, just kind of telling somebody about your day. Whereas that SAM memory is going to be much more fragmented. It could even be involuntarily triggered where you don't even mean to bring it up and you're just sort of like, someone starts talking about one thing and here you are just right back reliving that memory and bringing it up. So an example of this is like you might hear some fireworks and think, oh, it's the 4th of July. That's the VAM memory. That's the verbal, the story memory. Whereas you might hear fireworks with SAM memory and your body might start experiencing this right away before you can even connect the dots. So like, oh yeah, it's 4th of July. Or, oh, for me, I live in San Diego, so it's the SeaWorld fireworks going on. And it might connect deeper to what we've experienced. And it's not just that reliving piece. It doesn't have to be cause and effect. There's evidence here as well that it could just be that your body is remembering sights and things. Maybe it's a Facebook post. Maybe it's just that it's summer, that it's heating up, that it's that time of year. And so you could be experiencing and reliving some of these things and not even have the conscious connection that you're actually reliving it, just having that increased anxiety or that restlessness going on. So SAM matches on sensory context, not just the calendar. So the reaction can start days before the actual event. And SAM carries no, this was in the past tag. So trauma. So for the trauma anniversary, that jolt can feel like the danger is happening now. And again, everyone might experience this a little bit differently. It might not feel like a total reliving, but you might just feel on edge and have a lot more anxiety at certain times of year or around the significant anniversary. So why the date itself becomes a trigger. The memory never got the reliable timestamp, so the body can't confirm that the danger has passed. It's feeling it, it's reliving it, it's experiencing it as if it's happening again, and it's going to try to problem solve and get you safe. And yet it can't problem solve it because it's not actually happening up here, it's happening inside of your body. So it can be really unsettling. I know when I was in the thick of my PTSD, I'm in remission now, thank goodness. I had to go sit in my bathroom one day because I heard some fireworks outside and my body just would not calm down. And I had all these beautiful floor to ceiling windows and I hated having to do that, but I needed to get my body safe and bring it back down. And that was one of the only methods that I could do in that time with what I had in front of me to get my body back safe again. So sometimes it's more about moving into that body safety than it is about trying to problem solve whatever might be looping for you. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be the anniversary date. I know personally for me, 4th of July became a secondary anniversary. I didn't go to see fireworks for the first 2 years after my event. And then it sort of became that post-traumatic growth place where I was like, all right, I'm ready to do it. And the first 2 years after that were really unsettling. I did not have a good time watching fireworks. And little by little, now I can actually be calm in my body and have the joy of fireworks again. But for a while, July 4th became a secondary anniversary time. State-dependent context. So trauma is encoded with its full sensory backdrop, the time of year, light, and temperature. So again, it might not just be the year. Be kind to yourself about what it is. It's more important to notice like what is happening to me versus why this is happening to me. I know we all want the why, and you might be able to put two and two together, but it might be, oh, this it was hot that day, and all of a sudden it's a really warm day out, and might not even be related to the actual anniversary itself. And then conditioning over time. With each repeated anniversary, the anticipatory stress response can become conditioned, and the date itself becomes a learned trigger. This is why people often feel off for days before, and consciously connect it to the date. Other patterns the research has found, the lead up is often worse than the day itself. This obviously isn't true for everybody, but it very much could be sort of that anticipatory grief or anxiety can actually feel worse than, oh, that wasn't so bad. I can handle that. I hear that a lot from a lot of my clients. Milestone years can resurge unexpectedly. Reactions often quiet down for years 5 through 10, then spike again in round number anniversaries, 10, 20, 25 years. Um, Life transitions can reopen it even decades later. I see this all of the time in my practice. I got through that. It didn't bother me for years. Why is it all of a sudden coming back up again? And then they will have something very unrelated, but very significant happen. And it sort of reemerges whatever still is left to be processed about their grief. The body can react along with the mind. So some research links anniversary periods to upticks in physical health. And that you might not even catch that. It might be like, oh, why am I getting stomach aches or headaches or migraines all of a sudden this time of year, and never put two and two together that it's maybe much more an emotional reaction coming through physically. And it can happen to a whole community at once. Shared trauma anniversaries can produce a synchronized rise in distress across an entire community, not just individuals. So recognizing your own pattern. Do my hardest weeks cluster around a certain time of year or a certain season, or a certain date? Are birthdays, holidays, or changing seasons connected to how I feel? Is there an age that feels loaded, my age or the age of someone I lost? Do I feel worse in weeks leading up to the date or lighter once it's passed? Have milestone years 5, 10, and 20 hit differently than I expected? And do I notice a pattern only in hindsight looking back over the last year? And let's talk about what we can do about it. So, first and foremost, to piggyback on what Jill was talking about, healing is not linear. So I didn't put it in the slide, but it kind of piggybacks off the first one. Honor your grief. If, for the first 2 years, I didn't go and watch fireworks, that was me honoring my grief. I don't need to put my nervous system into any more fight or flight. I don't need to do that. I was doing enough work and enough exposure therapy that was my way of being kind to my nervous system and protecting it. So there is no should have, would have time stamp on it, right? If your brain didn't timestamp it, then there is no timestamp on the healing piece. So if another friend of yours went through a similar experience or that experience with you, and they seem to be doing better, there is no better than you are, that's let's not quantify that. Honor your grief, and it will take as long as it takes you to heal and get through that. Naming it in advance, expecting it reduces the power. Surprise is what often makes it feel worse. Oh, you know what? This date is always kind of hard for me. Let me go ahead and honor that. Plan the day. So a ritual, maybe you need to rest. Maybe that's a day that you just take it easy. Maybe that's a day that you do something really significant, or get some supportive company, whatever it is that you need. And I think that this evolves over time. One year you might need something different than another year. Lean on social supports. Tell trusted people a hard day is coming so that they can show up for you. Limit media exposure, especially like social media exposure, if you feel like it's going to, exacerbate this a little bit for you, especially around public anniversaries. For many of you, that will be a place of strength and support. And for others, that will be a place of like trigger and reliving. So it's check in with yourself about what it is that you need. And then use grounding and relaxation skills, breath work, five senses, movement, whatever helps you feel in your body. And I'm really big on reclaiming your date. So making some sort of ritual. My One of my best friends and I, we both lost our fathers very similar time. And we do Father's Day together. We go to brunch together. So um, we it's hard to be around people that haven't lost a parent or even we have a very similar relationships with our fathers. And so that's sort of our way of reclaiming the day, whatever it means to you. Lighting a candle, writing a letter, journaling, storytelling, creative art, music, whatever it might be, you can really, the world is your oyster. And then if you do really feel like you're holding on to something, or you haven't really processed your grief, and haven't quite made it to that healing place, uh, I always think getting professional supports and really strong clinical work is essential. So again, because what the science showed us in this is that this is happening from a body state. I mean, it's happening in your amygdala, which is in your brain, but everything in there is that your body reliving this and re-experiencing this. I'm big and partial to bottom up approaches, meaning that it's body based up into the brain versus top down. But the science does say, the research suggests that cognitive processing therapy, exposure therapy, EMDR, even like somatic experiencing and yoga-based practices can really help. One of the things those bottom up practices actually do also is help to shrink your amygdala. So if it's experienced a great deal of trauma, you might it's going to send all of the resources to the part of the brain that it needs the most. And so if you've not always, you could just be anxious, but if you happen to have been anxious for a really long time, it's possible that you have a larger amygdala than, your neighbor. And so some of those approaches can really help kind of get that amygdala back to where it's sort of intended to be. So it's not constantly shooting that alarm system off all of the time and hypersensitive. And, as an EMDR certified therapist and now a consultant in training, so I'm training other people how to do EMDR well. I'm a bit biased, but that's just me. And again, the goal isn't erasing the memory, it's separating that this happened to me from this is who I am. I'm broken. I'm well, this is just who I am. Whatever that storyline for you is. And the brain wants to finish processing. So your brain and your body will heal itself. But if things get stored either maladaptively, for me, when I left Vegas, it got stored maladaptively. It got stored as I should have done more around responsibility. And I was a psychiatric first responder at the time. And so my job was to run into safety. And I froze and I ran. And I had a lot of shame about that. And so that was playing on loop, and my brain was trying to problem solve how to fix how I could have done more, and it can't go back in time and do that. And I never needed to hold that in the first place. So one session of EMDR, it changed from I should have done more to this wasn't my fault, I needed to run. And everything in my body started to calm down in there. So good treatment will help if something feels like it's on loop or you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you're in like a prolonged state of grief. I highly suggest some good trauma work to help kind of nudge whatever might be looping inside of your brain or your body. Um, Trauma can interrupt that healing process. The memory gets left stuck in its raw sensory form instead of being fully processed. It also gets cut off from memory networks that hold the corrective information, like I survived, I'm safe now. Um, and then by safely activating the stuck memory and helping the brain complete its natural processing, therapy connects the body memory back to the story memory. And it can finally be filed. So that hippocampus can then timestamp it and it can become a story that has happened to you and not your identity. So key takeaways, trauma memory is stored differently. The amygdala overreacts and it doesn't get stored properly. And then your body is reliving it. It's not just it's not remembering it, it's reliving it. It leaves the memory fragmented, sensory and undated. It's a body memory, not a story memory. Anniversaries can trigger that stored memory without conscious recognition of the date. So again, there's a concept of neuroception where your body remembers before your brain does, or even remembers even when your brain doesn't. Um, and it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects family members, and they often notice the pattern first, or even notice it more significantly than some of our survivors. Anniversary reactions are common, predictable, and usually temporary, not a sign of failure to heal. And the same date can hold room for both distress and growth. Effective treatment exists. Honor your grief and get support. Um, Again, I'm really big on reclaiming your day. So, coping, treatment, and the day can hold more distress. Many survivors find room for reflection, connection, and real pride in how far they've come alongside the hard parts. Um, any questions? And there's my contact information in case anybody wants to reach out to me as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Keley? I know for me, and I know you brought this up, I think it's important to remember too, the anniversary effect can be any number of things in our life, not
Mhm.
just our incident.
Uh-huh.
I had a friend whose husband passed away unexpectedly, and she was not impacted by mass violence, but I shared with her about the anniversary effect, and she couldn't believe how much she felt it, and she was so thankful that I had shared it because
Uh-huh.
it's anything like that. And that's a trauma. You know,
Yeah.
you like you said, you losing your dad and sharing that with your friend. You know, it's all of that. So we could experience it any number of time in our life. And you did touch on this, but I never know if it's going to be a good year. Like,
Uh-huh.
each date, each anniversary date is different. I thought year five was going to be really hard on me. Year six was worse than year five.
Uh-huh.
So you never know, and it's the reminder to give yourself grace.
Yes. And because your body is remembering it more than your brain is because it didn't get filed in your brain in the right way, the typical way, I should say. Uh, you might not be able to put the pieces together of why. I know we always want to know the why, but the more I do that, man, I got into this field because I'm still the 2-year-old that's like, but why? But why? But why? I always have to know. I want to do the research. I want to read all the books. And I'm learning
Yeah,
in my own healing and the work that I do that it matters, but it matters a whole lot less. It's more important that it is happening versus why it's happening.
right. I know my brother passed away several years ago, and even this June, it was leading up to the anniversary of his passing, and I was just all out of sorts. And Alice asked me, she's like, "Isn't this like around the time of year of your brother's passing?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that."
Uh-huh.
So it is. It's if you start feeling out of sorts, look at the calendar.
Uh-huh.
Figure out, what might have happened, and all that. So, we do have a question. Somebody suggested to play sirens on YouTube at random to condition for reducing the effect of my anxiety. Does it have to be loud?
Does it have to? No. I mean, if it's helpful too, I would do that in small doses if you can handle it, if it feels like too much. But I do think any kind of exposure, I'd also highly suggest doing that in a supported, uh, I mean, we all do it. I went to the gun range afterwards because I needed to be around certain sounds and things. And like, even just someone jogging down the street would kind of like set everything off. I was on my walk today and I was just even noticing like, oh, that doesn't bother me anymore. Look at that. So it is important that fear extinction. It's important for our body to start to slowly learn that it's safe. But personally, in my own experience, I think it's also important to check your barometer for the day. So if you haven't slept well for 3 days and you've been really stressed out, probably not a great day to do exposure therapy. Yeah.
Jackie?
Um, yeah, I was going to respond to that question about the sort of classic desensitization. When I do that work, I don't know what you do, Kelly, but I um, pair that with teaching a lot of grounding
Uh-huh.
and breathing and things like that. So you're pairing the stimulus that might activate you with the relaxation and grounding, so that you're in the here and now, and it provides that what we call corrective experience. So it
Yes.
does work, but I think just going home and randomly having you know blaring things go off might make me a little worried about um yeah um just you have to have those two things. And yeah, I do that with folks in office as well. So thank you.
Can I comment on Dominique's
Absolutely.
question? So I did the prolonged exposure therapy. It was a 6 week course, and that was one of the things that was assigned as homework, was to go home and listen on YouTube to the things that activated you. But it was in a very, like Jackie was saying, it's a very controlled situation. I mean, they tell you exactly how to do it, how to monitor it, how long you listen for it or listen to it. Um, and the prolonged exposure itself was, again, like Jackie said, the therapist I worked with always kept you grounded, and it was a real intense process. So I just want to reinforce the importance of doing that with somebody who specializes in that kind of treatment. And
I've done EMDR targets on people who have done some self exposure therapy, and it has gone, they weren't able to ground, and it became its own traumatic event itself. We were able to reprocess that and get their body into safety with it. So yeah.
and I have a question, Kelly,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of your slides, it says, when does the brain learn that was then and this is now? And then it reads, depends partly on how intense the stress was. My question is the last part, and whether you felt outside your body,
Yeah.
dissociation during it. What is the dissociation?
So there was some of the research that talked about if you experience disassociation during your traumatic event, that it can be harder for it to then connect back in because it's a different phase of the nervous system, right? It's in that hypoarousal phase. It's not in the hyper. So like one's the gas pedal to your nervous system, and the other is sort of that detached. It's like I always use pretend there's a speaker, and it hyperarousal, as you turn that to 11, it's like blaring, you can hear it, it's your whole body being flooded. And hypoarousal is almost like a fuse blowing, and then it detaches. That's what makes it safe. So it can timestamp differently when it gets into that dissociative part. So
One other follow-up question on that. If you've dissociated and it causes you to not remember,
mhm.
is that something that you need to address in therapy? I mean,
Uh,
I would think so, but
Yeah, I mean, for some people do, some people don't, I think. Actually taking a course on disassociation now, so it's fresh in my mind a bit. Sometimes there's parts that just aren't accessible, and that's okay. Our body, I say to honor our body, so if our body put it away for a reason, if it's protecting something that actually needs to be processed and it doesn't feel accessible, it's okay. So sometimes I do some IFS parts work. So we might work with some of the dissociative parts or just sort of build into that grounding And so our body can start to feel safe, but safety is sort of that very, very first piece, whether that is your body experiencing that reliving flood or whether it's that detachment or disassociation. So I work with a lot of first responders. They're great at compartmentalizing. We do a lot of grounding and a lot of like what we call an EMDR phase 2 work, but they're pretty good at shutting it off.
Yeah.
A lot of them are really good at shutting it off. So it's not all bad. It's can we then access it again when we need to, or is it more of a protective place, or so it's a bigger conversation for sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Like, one thing Kelly brought up too is not to compare your reaction and whether you get activated for something, whether it's the anniversary effect, because we each, prior to and since our incident, have had other trauma that we've been through. So even if you went with your absolute best friend, you guys have so much in common. You could go with your twin sister, and you're both going to have different reactions. And it's again giving yourself the grace and reminding yourself that this is normal for the abnormal experience that we've had. Alice, did you have anything?
No, I have a ton of notes. Kelly, thank you so much. I love that you gave some vocabulary to things that people are feeling. I love that you talked about the noticing patterns and the questions that they could ask themselves and the meaning making and reclaiming the day. Um, I really appreciate you sharing that you went through it yourself
Yes.
and that you have the book knowledge, but would the experience cause you to understand it at a deeper level? And I just really appreciate your sharing today. So thank you so much. My guess is we'll have some questions this week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Love to be here.
Absolutely. We've got one more comment, I think. Let me see.
So,
Check it out.
Nikki, do you want to?
There we go. Okay. The day of my event, I noticed the weather. And again, I was stuck indoors for an extended amount of time, but just the weather changed from prior to when it started to after.
Mhm.
I remember what it felt like. The temperature dropped, the storms were coming in at the evening, the mist that was happening. But it seems to me that's maybe somehow in my memory, the weather was calming me, but the sounds were more alarming.
Mm.
Why does our brain attach more significance to the sound?
It's going to take any of that sensory information that it can grab onto. So if it looks like, sounds like, tastes like, feels like something that is upsetting or traumatic, it's gonna remember it. And so if the sounds, and maybe it's because you can't see it. So one of the things I was recognizing in my own healing is as I started to heal, things would still alarm my body, like a car backfire. But then if I could turn and see the car, I'd be okay. And so I think sometimes when it's the sound and you can't quite look and see what that is, even if oh, that I don't know what the weather was like, but oh, that's lightning, or oh, that's wind, or oh, that's something.
Mhm.
There's something about that I think your brain is like, yeah, but I need to tell. I need to make sure, like, is that safe or is that not? And if it can't timestamp it, then it might keep playing on loop and going like, that sounds a lot like something during a time of our life that was really, really scary. And I just need to make sure that we're still safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One thing, and I know this with several routers I've talked with, I remember helicopters going over the concert all night, in part because they do like Grand Canyon tours and things like that. but I do not remember helicopters during the incident. And
Mhm.
I've talked to a lot of routers who do remember that. So you could talk to somebody else who was at your incident who doesn't remember the sounds but remembers the weather.
Uh-huh.
So it's, yeah, we never know. And I still to this day don't remember helicopters, although there was one time in San Diego, probably 2 years after, that a helicopter was flying really low over my neighborhood, and all I wanted to do was hide under my car. So it's like
Mhm.
somehow I must have heard them, but I don't remember hearing them.
Mhm.
So that was the weirdest reaction. I just like, what the heck is going on? But it's kind of like Kelly was saying, our body is protecting us in different ways, and we're such unique individuals, and we've all been through different things that it's going to protect us in different ways. And we have a comment. I appreciate you providing EMDR services to people. I give more validation to those who have needed and received it. And they had said earlier, where EMDR is amazing. It was life-changing for them. So, and I will say the same for me. I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't gone through EMDR.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, Jill. I mean, it changed my life. Mine was more physical, obviously, because of my injuries. Um, every year and never fails. I feel it. I feel it in
Uh-huh.
my body physically.
Yeah.
And EMDR kind of just, I mean, it helped me like with my mind, but with my physical body, I still feel it every year. As soon as it's coming up, because also it's the weather changing to fall.
Yeah.
For
Yep.
Yeah.
for us, that's a big deal.
And
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 so
the
the
days are
weather,
getting the daylight is getting shorter.
Mhm.
yeah. And so when the weather changes, I start feeling it immediately.
Yeah.
And my ankle starts throbbing and all of those memories physically of all my boo-boos from that night, um falling and all the bruises and just it physically it affects me, and I feel like I'm really in a good place in my mind because of EMDR, because I go watch fireworks, I go shooting on a regular. Um, but when it comes to the anniversary effect, it's such a thing. And I've been telling this people like forever, like, this is a thing. You guys need to read into it. Like, this is a thing. And physically, my body will be like, oh,
Uh-huh.
it's time. And I'll be like, how do you know that?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
I
got
feel,
bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and took all of these courses and got little, fancy certificates and everything. And had I known that my body was much wiser than my brain, I would have spent more time there.
Yeah.
seriously. And I just, there's nothing I can do
Mhm.
to prepare for that. I mean, I know it's coming, so then I just kind of get ready for it. But there's nothing else that I guess I can do for the physical things.
There might still be some pieces. There might be, depends if it's truly physical or if there's some of that emotional stuff coming through physically, which is why I think a lot of those uh bottom up approaches are really good for that sort of thing. So,
Real quick before we go to Alice, somebody commented, I stay as fit as possible as if I have to run again.
mhm,
Yeah, so there's that too.
yeah.
Alice.
So, Kelly, how would you suggest people explain the anniversary effect to people who are close to them?
That is a
The
good question. Yeah.
especially for those who don't really get why people are still having symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big conversation, I think, too, because if you haven't experienced it, then you don't really get it. So if you have really trusted loved ones who are trying to get it and just really don't understand, but man, do I sit with a lot of people and have experienced it myself where it's like, God, is that still happening? Which is one of the worst things that you can say to someone because we're already thinking in our head, like, why is this still happening? Why is like, ugh,
So
really?
you haven't. Do you have any like one-liners for people?
Um, I don't know if I have a web liner because I think it is specific person to person. And I don't know if anybody else, has one off the top of their head. But I'll think about that one. I think it's maybe like what happened to me was significant and my body is still remembering or some version of that. But again,
Okay.
some people might think that that is just wackadoodle.
Mhm.
But they're going to think that anyway, right? So I
Right.
think it's important that you honor your own body there. But it's always the most important, I think one of the most unfortunate parts is when the people around us just like don't quite get it.
Right.
You know,
And
Why
I,
aren't you
to be
over
fair,
it yet?
I wouldn't want them to. I wouldn't want them to know.
No,
I would never wish that on anybody.
no.
But they're not going to know. And maybe it's that helps me kind of grips with it of like you couldn't know. I not I know more than you. I know more than you about this. That like it's more global. It's bigger than you
Yes.
really possibly understand.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I know that I've shared this article that I just put the link in with a lot of you, but this is a really good article from the University of Nebraska talking about the anniversary effect, and it's something that you can give to a
Mhm.
loved friend, loved one who doesn't understand. Because sometimes coming directly from us, they're like, yeah, 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 you're making a big deal out of it. But this is actually in writing. And you can also, when we get the link to this, the Kelly's presentation, you can share this with them too. Yeah, there's a lot of science that actually says this is a legitimate thing. It's not in our heads. This is very legit. And the more that we can share with people who care about us, the easier it's going to make it for us to get the support.
And and if you're going through it and really struggling, also be okay with not having to be the educator of everyone around you too, if you're okay with that.
And that's why we have each other. We've got the survivor community, we have the peer support programs, we have programs like this because we know together that we all understand. We might have gone through different incidents and we've had different experiences in our life, but in general, we get that.
and remember, we have the trauma recovery yoga once a month. The calendar's already up. And of course, Ron, our navigator, if you're interested in working with an EMDR therapist, I agree. I'm EMDRIA trained as well. Not certified. I don't do it enough. It take me forever because I don't have that many individual clients anymore, but make sure they have quality training. That's important. When I've seen, I don't know, Kelly, what you think when I've had people come to me who've had not good experiences with EMDR, my experience is because the therapist jumps right in without knowing where the client is at and how um, you know, uh, they just kind of do it with everybody without a proper assessment and without those phase two tools of,
Yeah.
calm, safe place and things like that.
They rush through that
Yeah, they
phase.
do.
Like,
I agree.
and
Yeah.
now I'm consulting other people and helping people train. There's also just there's a want to get people well and to rush right into that, the actual processing. And again, you won't know. Everyone processes EMDR very differently. And so I've stopped guessing. I have seen Vietnam vets coast right through, and I've seen people who have a one-time trauma and it's looping and looping, and like all of your own defense mechanisms and protective parts and all of your own adaptions are in there, and just there's things in there that we might not even realize that are so much of our brain is subconscious. So there might be something in there, a missing puzzle piece that like we have to explore together, and it can rush too quickly or you aren't given the right tools. So
Yeah.
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 Like Jackie was saying, if you are looking for a therapist in general, EMDR therapist, any other modality, that is a service that the Resiliency Center offers at no charge to us. Ron Keenan is amazing at finding somebody. I actually went through that process myself when I moved to Tennessee because I couldn't have my same therapist. And it was so nice because he finds out if they take your insurance, if they're taking new clients, if they are, he has questions to make sure that they're trauma focused. And that's so key for us that we make sure we have a therapist who's trauma focused. Okay, so we just want to remind everybody that we have the Continue the Conversation with Support group twice a month. It's the third Tuesday of each month at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, and the fourth Thursday of each month at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. That is facilitated by Jackie and myself. And we oftentimes start talking about what we talked about tonight and then go into anything that is going on in our lives, whether it's something having to do with your incident or not. We know that we are reacting to things now because of our incident, or the way we react is directly because of our incident. So we talk about all sorts of different things. Next month, we're excited to welcome back Dr. Alyssa Reingold from the National Mass Violence Center. And she's going to be talking about when trauma shows up, understanding and managing trauma cues after mass violence. So, we call it activations. Other people have called it triggers. National Mass Violence Center calls it trauma cues. Unfortunately, I think all of us have gone through that. So it's nice to know how we can understand why it's going on, learn to manage those so that it's not as impactful for us. So hopefully you can join us on September 1st. We have the additional support. So if you'd like to be paired with a heart mentor, you can go to the resiliencyandjustice.org/heart. The Resiliency and Justice Center has lots of other great information on their website. The National Mass Violence Center has amazing resources, including their virtual resiliency center. Their Transcend NMVC app is built specifically for survivors of mass violence. If you go to download it, please put in Transcend NMVC because there is more than one Transcend app. And then all of the integrated services programs offered through the Resiliency and Justice Center are available at no charge to anyone impacted by any mass violence incident. That is directly or indirectly. So community responders, spouses, children, friends, whatever, they are more than welcome to join us. We have the heart programs, the peer support first Tuesdays, and the continuing the conversation, along with a weekly meditation and mindfulness program. And they do also do a longer one once a month. Jackie mentioned the trauma recovery yoga. We do have meditative art that I am now facilitating, and I know several of you on here have joined us. And then the only in-person one is the equine therapy demonstration. So if you happen to be in Vegas, visiting Vegas, and they're doing a demonstration, we'd really encourage you to go. It's amazing how calming and therapeutic horses truly are. And for information on any of these, you can go to resiliencyandjustice.org/calendar. Brief look at the calendar. Anything that is not event specific is open to anyone impacted by any mass violence incident. And thank you guys so much for joining us. It was so good to see everyone.